Welcome everybody back to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm very excited for today's episode and really just spending time with two very meaningful men doing really brilliant things in the world. But before I get to them, I want to talk a little bit about what their company is and just really get clear on anybody that isn't certain of what Unchained has been bringing to the world. So Unchained has been founded in 2016. It's a global leader in Bitcoin-related financial services, guided by its mission to empower people around the world to secure their wealth with Bitcoin and participate in the emerging Bitcoin economy. Today, we have Joseph Kelly and Dhruv Bansal, the CEO and the CSO, Chief Science Officer and Chief Executive Officer, and both co-founders of Unchained. So welcome, fellas. It's amazing to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, Eric. Glad to be here.
Nice to be here, Eric.
Thanks, guys. So for those of you that don't know Joseph and Dhruv, and you're listening to us for the first time, I've had the pleasure of listening to Dhruv on stage at Bitcoin Atlantis. Really brilliant work. So I'll start with introducing Dhruv. Dhruv Bansal has been Unchained's Chief Science Officer. He's a well-known thought leader in the Bitcoin space. He holds a PhD in physics from University of Texas, and his analytical and scientific approach has significantly shaped Unchained's technology and security infrastructure. So I'm really excited to go deeper into this. You have a lot of language and prolific written skills, having authored numerous insightful articles on Bitcoin and its implications. And
Eric, I just want to thank you for the intro. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but thank you for the intro. But I feel like I must say, I never actually got my PhD. I feel like that was a slight miscommunication from our PR people. It's actually better because if I had a PhD and I were a real scientist, I don't think I would feel as free to talk about some of the crazy ideas that I have around Bitcoin and how I think it's meaningfully interesting from a scientific perspective. I think because I'm just a PhD dropout and a lowly entrepreneur, I feel very free to opine and speculate about those areas. So I just wanted to correct that for the record.
I thank you for that integrity check. It's very important actually bringing that to the table. So thank you for igniting that level of awareness for us all. And most importantly, the fact that you're willing to say that you dropped out and take the initiative to really go forward into the infinite space, which is really why we're here, is really beautiful. So thank you for this, brother. It already shows that level of sincerity and truth right from the get-go. So I appreciate you for that. And my apologies for miscommunicating as well.
No, I think we just sent you the wrong info.
Yeah, cool. You're amazing. And Joseph, brother, the CEO of Unchained, serial entrepreneur, extensive background in finance tech, also a college dropout. And prior to founding Unchained, Joseph co-founded InfoChips, a big data startup acquired by CSC in 2013. Passion for Bitcoin, together with leadership and vision, have been instrumental in helping, Unchained become one of the world's leading Bitcoin financial services companies. So, fellas, I'm excited to pay attention to you, fellas. Listen to you and learn from you both.
Thanks, man.
So, getting into the depths of this, I'd love to get curious about your guys' experience of why first, because on the Resilient Minds podcast, we really always talk about, with amazing thought leaders, always getting curious about why they're doing our experiences to really determine our why. And it's beautiful that you are both so true and honest right from the get-go. Hey, I dropped out of college, I dropped out of my PhD. I dropped out because I saw something deeper and way more meaningful, and I saw something that was not actually being truthful. So, fellas, I'd love to learn, if you don't mind, this experience, this why that started to get you into a depth of wanting to change something and knowing that there was certainty with that you were going to go on this path together? Who wants to start?
Yeah, I can take a first cut. I mean, I think something important, relevant for Dhruv and I, and both those buys in between them, is that that company Input Shims, we're both co-founders there, along with some others, and so that makes us this is so far a 15-year kind of working relationship,
Wow.
friendship, business partnership, things like that. And so I think for each of us have had a personal journey and reasons for at times things like dropping out that there's probably overlapping principles and values at work there, but also, yeah, I think what's probably kept us a lot together professionally and personally is some of our shared curiosities for the world, for how the world works, for kind of rationalize or recognizing what is Bitcoin, what is it here for, what are some valuable things to build with it. That then I think combined with some of our both fierce independence and desire to kind of live out a great life that is likely rewarding in personal context, professional context, financial context, things like that. So I think that's kind of brought us into business together in a lot of ways, and we have a lot of bridging values through that.
I might just add that I feel, as entrepreneurs, it's probably fair to say that most people, when they start businesses, I mean, their goal is economic. It's financial independence. It's to become wealthy. Maybe sometimes it's to solve a problem. Like there's really a thing that they want to fix in the world, and they go out and do that. Sometimes it's that they're on a mission, but those are more rare. I feel like Joe and I's last business, like we sort of started with something like a mission, but it kind of turned into more of a, well, this is what really sells. This is where the real business came from, something that was maybe different than our original vision for our mission in that company. And that's okay, that happens. I mean, that was us listening to the market and trying to be good entrepreneurs. I think when we started Unchained, we were really curious about Bitcoin, and we felt like this was a great opportunity to build a profitable, exciting, big, new, cool business. I remember Joe and I going back and forth in 2016 saying, hey, what do you think is going to be huge in 2022? And Bitcoin was right at the top of that list. And so that's what we decided to work on. Like, good for us. That was a smart decision. But there's this saying, Bitcoin changes you, you don't change Bitcoin. And I feel like that happened to us to a significant degree. That over time, I think we both began to really believe in Bitcoin in a way that we didn't when we even first started the business. Believe in Bitcoin for itself, believe in Bitcoin over and above other cryptocurrencies. That was another thing that I think happened to both Joe and I. Initially, we were more open to Ethereum and other altcoins. These days, I don't think that's very interesting to us. And moreover, I think we've now become a mission-oriented company. That previously we really were just thinking about, blockchain tech, Bitcoin will be big, we'll do something, we'll flip it, we'll sell the business, quick 3-year adventure, right? But this has turned into an 8-year story already. And it's going to keep going, which I'm excited for. And I feel like we're not only finding product market fit with the Bitcoin community and people that value our products and the security and the custody and the financial services that we offer. We actually do feel like we're on a mission to help educate people in the world around Bitcoin, to help them store it safely in a way that is in concordance with the spirit of Bitcoin and doesn't confuse and sort of muddy the waters by using an antiquated custodial model to approach a next generation digital asset. So it's been interesting for me as an entrepreneur and as a leader at Unchained to watch us go, myself both personally and the whole business, kind of turn that corner and realize that, hey, there's actually something really valuable and important going on here in Bitcoin, and that Unchained can be right in the center of. Wow, what an opportunity. And in the back of our minds, we're not thinking so much about, okay, how do we flip this business now, right? What's the next raise to do and the target acquirer and the number to hit so that we can get the valuation we need. It's really become more about, okay, how do we build a really good business, right? With clients that love us and are loyal and stay, and that's profitable and that's poised to grow for decades alongside Bitcoin. That's so much more satisfying now, I'll be honest.
You touched on, you both touched on such beautiful points there. Sorry, go ahead, Joe. You want to?
No.
Okay. So you guys really touched on something that really is beautiful, because it's like economics, mission, and good business. And this is something that, conscious entrepreneurship, I find in today's generation, it's a really important standard at the most outstanding level that we must continue to cultivate, in our culture, in the way that we choose to move forward. How do we change the nature of good business? And I think that, it's interesting because you talked about principles and values and a shared curiosity of bringing this to life, right? And getting curious allowed you to go through that economics, discovering the mission, and then actually even listening to the things that you were uncertain about by paying more attention, asking better questions. So I'm really, a perfect mirror for you, because I'm continuing to get curious about your guys's experience, which then I believe will also bring that nature to a lot of other people as well, other entrepreneurs that want to integrate into this infrastructure and the economy. So I'm curious to understand, this depth a little bit more, because for those that are really wanting to tap into this really good business, or what I call conscious entrepreneurship, it is really about this shared purpose and this shared mission that I believe Bitcoin is part of. That I believe that ultimately is, I always say, the principles that guide us will be the ones that define us. And I found when I went to Bitcoin Atlantis that those principles were very prevalent in the standards of what Bitcoin can do and does. So I'd love to get a little bit curious about your guys' aha moments in the moment of those principles and standards when you discovered the uniqueness between the blockchain tech and cryptocurrency versus, or indifference, or the difference versus, however we want to describe it, crypto and Bitcoin, or the aha moment that you both had. And I'd love to start with you, Joseph. Like, if you can have that specific aha moment that changed the nature for you to say, hey, Bitcoin is a completely different asset than cryptocurrency and what's happening in the blockchain tech, and why, and then we'd love to go over to you, Dhruv. That's okay, fellas.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to even just the commitment to start Unchained, that even though there can be this frame of, you start something that could flip or sell, but that I still had to have an attitude towards what I did next, and had the privilege of considering, what could I dedicate myself to for at least the next 10 years of my career, and knowing, after having gone through a painful but still rewarding startup experience, that, hey, I could be signing up for a lot of pain, a lot of punches in the face, a lot of grief, and heartbreak. So that, knowing that was kind of some of the sacrifice of what I needed to sign up my body, consciousness, family, all that up for the next decade, the thing I did come back to was just that, what could I be curious about for that length of time? And so Bitcoin had that. Bitcoin, was, and I still view it as this prism for all kinds of knowledge and understanding about the world, for how it works as a society, where money comes from, how economics come from, work, how markets work, how price discovery happens, how people transmit and communicate value, how a technology gets adopted by a community or the world. And so all that stuff is are really great questions that's just the edge of where we live at in like our time. And so Bitcoin, I was like, yeah, okay, it could take 10 years or more to like really either understand this, or really, and there's enough of a well of knowledge and potential insights and knowledge to kind of get out of studying Bitcoin over that period and actively working in it. And so I think then that curiosity, combined with the commercial understanding that, well, for this to be business, it needs to know who its customers are. And then early on making the bet that says long-term Bitcoin holders are good customers, and that's who we want to serve and bring products to. That then oriented our business and oriented with this long-term perspective. And so I'd say the aha moments, I think part of what made also the early experience with Bitcoin rewarding is that Dhruv, through his just greater technical background and knowledge, and where he spends most of his time, I could ask a lot of questions. I joke he was my Sherpa up this sort of Bitcoin mountain of understanding, helping me get up from just a base camp level understanding of like either how mining works, or how consensus is enforced, or how Bitcoin is not susceptible to certain types of attacks and things like that. Like I could really test those questions and the ideas out with him. And so it really strengthened both of our understanding, I think, going through that process, because he was a little earlier than to me than kind of, I think, appreciating what Bitcoin solved and the ingenuity there. And so then I think that one of the points I'll make about Bitcoin is that it's something that does yield to that genuine question and understanding, that there's always for me a fun meta process to watch people go through in terms of their initial reactions to Bitcoin, which are not unlike mine. Sounds like a scam. Sounds like a kind of thing that, it's not going to have value. Sounds like trading cards. Sounds like how I hear gold bugs talk about gold. And so I just don't tune them off. And so all those kinds of, early like epistemic almost responses of just like, this thing doesn't seem real. But when you study enough of the subject, cryptography, later on more like monetary theory, those things, and but like at least from a lot of the very grounded, physics-based, energetic-based, cryptographic math, like those kind of very hard sciences, that you come out with a lot of satisfying answers. And so then for me, what's kind of lost me, or why I would answer maybe crypto and a lot of altcoin stuff doesn't interest me, is that there's not the same fruit at the end of most lines of questioning about, well, how does this work? How does it deal with that? How about this? Or what if things change? Or like that there's like the really truly stable principles and concepts and things that like you think would carry this stuff in an enduring manner forward, and it just doesn't exist. It's just not as satisfying. If you're really real about getting to the root answers for things, Bitcoin doesn't have all the answers, or there's just not, there's still unanswered questions about its future. But gosh, if it's just not, if I can't just have a testament about like, but there is reality here. There's real customers at Unchained. There's real utility of this. There's real, realness to this stuff that I don't often see elsewhere in the industry, I guess.
Beautiful, thank you. Dhruv, please.
I'll offer maybe a little bit more of a technical and sort of philosophical structured answer. This is like a big theme for me. I've been writing a lot about these kinds of ideas recently in the last year or two. You can find some of that writing on the Unchained blog. And I'll try to focus in on like why in particular Bitcoin is something that we're excited about at Unchained, and we're not interested or focused at all on altcoins or Ethereum or Solana or whatever comes down that list of hundreds of thousands of coins out there. And I think really, I'll try to make this point in like maybe a few related ways. And so, it might take a minute here, but we'll get through it. And then hopefully by the end of this, it's clear why we believe what we believe. Yeah. So maybe I'll ask a question first. How familiar are you, Eric, or maybe your audience, with the concept of like a Bitcoin testnet?
So I personally have zero understanding of what a testnet is.
Perfect. Let's just review it. Then. So Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer network, right? It's out there in the world. People are running nodes. Those nodes are constantly communicating, and somehow through all that effort arises, the blockchain, the Bitcoin asset, the ability to transact. Like all that stuff is supported by this peer-to-peer network of people running software. Software developers, when they write software, they really enjoy and benefit from having something like a test environment. It's not what they would call the production environment. The production environment is what everybody actually uses. The test or development environment is the thing that developers use to help develop the software. It's not meant to be real, but it's meant to be often as close as possible to production. Sometimes it's even an exact copy of production, more or less. It's just not being used by users. And therefore, if it breaks because of a change a developer made, that's okay. They can fix it. They can reset it. Okay, so that's just a common practice in software development. So you might be surprised to learn that Bitcoin has a testnet. When we talk about Bitcoin, and we talk about Bitcoin having a price of whatever, $60-something thousand today, we're talking about the Bitcoin production network, so-called mainnet in Bitcoin's language. There are other developer-oriented, non-mainnet versions of Bitcoin out there. There's one called testnet, which is there's many others, but let's just focus on this one for a minute. Testnet is really interesting to me, and it was for me a big aha moment about why, like, what is important about Bitcoin, how does it work, what is the key insight here. Testnet it's hard to say, but with one tiny maybe minor difference, testnet is the exact same thing as Bitcoin. Like the Bitcoin mainnet and testnet they differ only in really the fact that that very first Genesis block, which is a phrase that you may have heard, the first block that starts the blockchain, which has to be manually kind of created in a special way, that block is slightly different. But in every other way, they're the exact same. There's a 21 million Bitcoin cap. There's 50 Bitcoin per block to start out with a halving schedule that's exactly the same. Transactions work the same way. The cryptography
Literally
is
the same software, just
exactly the same software. Like you just it's meant to be a great tool for developers to use, right? So totally the same as regular Bitcoin. So this is interesting because like Bitcoin, if Bitcoin is like a digital gold, testnet is like a digital fool's gold, right? It's like iron pyrite, but made of bits. But it's even more similar, right? Gold and iron pyrite are two different chemical substances, right? They have different atomic structure, et cetera, et cetera. Testnet is really almost exactly the same as mainnet in its design and its function. But this is the crucial idea. Testnet doesn't work. It barely works. It's not really functional. Like we as developers have moved past using testnet and we use other networks that work slightly differently. And why is that the case? Well, because testnet coins aren't valuable, right? And so this completely ruins how Bitcoin works. Like there's a wonderful saying. How do you get a testnet coin, by the way? Well, you have to mine the testnet coins, right? Because it's Bitcoin. It's exactly the thing. So someone is out there mining Bitcoin that isn't worth anything. So that's interesting. And then if you're a developer, how do you get testnet coins? Well, you ask somebody for them. You're like, yo, can you just give me some testnet coins so I can, develop my applications? And they'll just give them to you for free because they're not valuable, right? There's a wonderful saying from a website that allows you to get testnet coins so you can use it in your application. And it says, testnet coins are useful because they're valueless, right? If you make them valuable, they'll become useless, right? That's an interesting kind of contradiction in the way we
please don't sell
about...
your testnet coins to each other is basically what the disclaimer is.
Right. Basically,
please don't.
I'm going to give you these free testnet coins so you can develop your application. They're not worth anything in the market. Don't sell. They're not real Bitcoins. Like even though they're almost indistinguishable from Bitcoin, prima facie, and then sort of they're both digital gold in a sense, right? But let's come back to it. Like, why are they so useless? Or sorry, they're useful for us as developers, but why doesn't the testnet network actually work? The testnet network doesn't actually work because the coins aren't worth anything. So if the coins aren't worth anything, miners are not motivated to like treat it seriously. Miners will sometimes put a whole bunch of mining hash rate on a testnet just to try something out, and then they'll take it off again after 10 minutes. So testnet experiences crazy block time volatility. Sometimes you'll experience periods of hundreds of blocks coming like every few minutes, or sorry, every few seconds very quickly. Sometimes you might get into a situation where you're waiting many, many hours for blocks. That never happens in the real Bitcoin, right? In the real Bitcoin, blocks come every 10 minutes reliably. And why is that? Well, it's because if they slow down a little bit, miners will be like, oh, this is my opportunity. I should turn on more hash rate. And if they speed up too much, the network will adjust the difficulty, right, to make it more challenging for miners to get those same coins. And that process is so finely calibrated by economics and self-interest of miners and the rules of the Bitcoin network that for 15 years and like 15 to 20 orders of magnitude in price and energy usage and adoption, we've maintained a 10-minute block time. That's just false of testnet. So I ask, the general world, right, sort of asked myself when I was learning about these concepts, well, one of these things seems to work really well. The other one doesn't seem to work very well at all. They're the exact same. The only difference is that Bitcoin mainnet, these coins are worth thousands of dollars. Bitcoin testnet, these coins are worthless. And so it was a deep insight for me that, okay, so you can't just be like, well, I'll build a blockchain and I don't want it to have anything to do with money. Like somehow the blockchain is not solving the problem here. What's solving the problem here is that Bitcoin is valuable. That was a really important deep insight for me. And I came to that very early because of testnet, the existence of testnet and the realization that even though it's kind of a useful tool as a developer, it doesn't really work very well because the economic incentives aren't present the way that they are for the mainnet. Therefore, economic incentives must be deeply important to the way that blockchain systems work. That was just, for me, a very early insight that led me down, I think, the correct path here. Once you believe that, things like private hyperledgers and things like this, like blockchain as an internal kind of or corporate IT technology that's divorced from money, doesn't make any sense at all. So you're saying you just want to build Bitcoin testnet. That's what I hear when people talk about those concepts. So early on, Joe and I were able to avoid an entire like wrong turn in our business hypothesizing. We knew from like 2016, 17, once we learned about testnet, that this doesn't make any sense. Like, let's not do that. Let's focus in on Bitcoin as money because that's what makes it important. I'd say The next insight and this one is taking me a little bit more time to, I think we learned it early, but it took me a little more time to articulate well. I'm still struggling, but I will make an attempt. The next insight was that Bitcoin is really like what makes it work is not the blockchain, as we sort of have started to imply already by how important the moneyness is. But even what makes the money work is not the blockchain. What makes the money work is the market that Bitcoin creates to support the features and services that allow a distributed peer-to-peer money to operate and exist in the world. And that's the key idea. I think when we talk about decentralization, like that is an important ideal in Bitcoin, and it's I think it's the thing that makes Bitcoin most unique in some ways. Decentralization, it can be hard to define. There's an intuitive idea of what it means. Often you'll see a network diagram with nodes that are all linked in some crazy way. I like to define decentralization as market driven. That's the real meaning of decentralization. In a centralized system, there is a central actor that can enforce the rules. In the absence of central actors that control the system, how are rules to be enforced? There's only one solution, that each local actor must be independently incentivized to follow the rules. That at small scale, that works great without money. But as systems scale, you really need the economic incentive to cooperate to be greater than the economic incentive to engage in adversarial behavior. So the only tool you have is those economic incentives, and it can be carrot or stick. It can be either or. You can either make more money by cooperating, or it can be really expensive to try to be adversarial. Both work, and Bitcoin uses both techniques. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin uses market-based economic incentives to create the behavior it wants. So that's like very powerful idea to me, and it suggests that adding more complexity into Bitcoin, adding all this, Turing complete smart contracting and all this is kind of missing the point. We're not trying to program computers on the blockchain. We're trying to program human beings with money. And as soon as we make that leap, then it's less interesting to try to write complex financial code inside of a blockchain that self-executes. And like that's the whole reason that things like Ethereum and Solana, et cetera, exist. They're confusing, they're cargo culting, in my view, the blockchain as some sort of like panacea, some solution that like automatically creates and sort of exudes decentralization. And that's false. It's market incentives which cause decentralization. And then the final point I'll make on that, because I've been ranting here for 10 minutes, final point I'll make is, well, okay, if you now accept and believe that market incentives are what create decentralization, the next question is, well, what do those markets look and feel and structured like? And the line I like to say is what Bitcoin teaches us is that if you want to provide services that are decentralized, or you want to solve a problem in a decentralized way, you need to use markets to do it. But because markets are hard to control, you have to break your problem down into pieces that are so small that a market can actually solve them. Because markets are powerful but limited. They struggle to have consensus about things in the world. So the less consensus requirements you can create, the more you can make things local, the more you can make things price and market driven, the more robust things can be. But then you're limited. You can't be like, I want to build a market for all the world's compute. That's too big of a space. That's too big of a problem. And when Ethereum tries to do that by being a world computer directly into the blockchain, that's kind of what it's saying. It's saying miners are the service provider for the entire compute stack of the entire world. That's a huge problem. Bitcoin has a very narrow problem. Like, in fact, and this is what I've been arguing in some recent articles, even Bitcoin splits up that problem into sub-problems. Like Bitcoin's problem is I want to make digital gold. I want to make an online money. Okay, great. But there's like at least 3 or 4 sub-problems there. One is, okay, well, how do you distribute the initial supply of that money? Okay, how do you create consensus during transaction creation? Like, how do you make sure that people can transact with the money? Okay, how do you ensure that the cost of mining like changes in sync with the real world cost of electricity, ASICs, and other? There's so many sub-problems. And Bitcoin actually takes each of those sub-problems and uses independent market technology or independent market structures to solve that problem. So things like the proof of work subsidy and so on, these are solving problems of distribution of the initial Bitcoin supply. Things like the block size, these are solving problems for the market for transaction settlement. Bitcoin has very clever structures to take the large problem of how do I make money and break it into small problems and then build bespoke like well-functioning markets that can scale infinitely large to solve those very specific tiny problems. And then Bitcoin draws a line and says, once I've done this, I'm done. That's all I do. I don't allow you to store data in me. I don't allow you to build an arbitrary computing platform on me. You're not going to put, houses on the blockchain. Like, that's not what I do. I'm just really good money. If you would like to now build more complex, decentralized services on top of me, like more functioning higher layer markets, go ahead. And I feel like that's like Joe and I would say Unchained and a lot of Bitcoiners, in fact, true belief about the future of this industry is that Bitcoin has already won. It is the best money. It already solves the problem it set out to solve. It doesn't solve every problem related to money, especially problems around transaction cost or speed, right? Like, because it's not a direct payments network. It's a settlement network. It's the backbone, layer zero of the world's economy. And so things like the Lightning Network or other layer twos, like there's many new markets, and those things, by the way, are markets as well. There's many new markets that will be built to provide the services that the altcoin folks are promising, but it'll happen in a way that's denominated in Bitcoin, and it won't be on the blockchain. It'll just be layers of markets of people selling each other things. And the fact that Bitcoin exists, it's kind of in Thiel's language, a 0 to 1 kind of change. Now that Bitcoin exists, we don't have to reinvent the blockchain. We're never going to use the blockchain again. It's not important. Once Bitcoin exists, we're just going to use Bitcoin to program the incentives that make all these next level markets work. So that's my long rant about why we don't care about Ethereum, Solana, and anything else, right? Like, it's the moneyness that matters. Like, these things are actually markets, not blockchains, and that we need layers of such markets in order to grow the system, not arbitrarily programmable smart contracts living inside of nightmarishly complex blockchains.
I'll say
Amazing.
I love too how the way it's fun to have this format because I think I love how the tie between the commercial interest that drives Bitcoin and makes it successful through the independent, almost really truly entrepreneurial efforts of the actors in the system solving their individual problems. That for me, that is reflective of even the Unchained kind of founding story. We wanted to solve the problem of, for long-term Bitcoin holders, getting more traditional financial services, but around their Bitcoin. And so yeah, I think there's tying the motivations there between how I think Dhruv and I and the company acts in the space, because we saw the pain, we saw what it's like to try to sell a solution to the world without being clear about the problems, or trying to bring that panacea like technology, let's boil the ocean together. That doesn't things aren't just structured that way. Nature does not work that way quite, nor do seemingly healthy economies.
I love it. You guys bring up, and I love how you just touched on nature. The really beautiful responsibility part of what this is. So I have so many questions that I can go deeper down from both of you guys' response. I just want to really talk about specifically the central factors of tokenization and how people are trying to use these smart contracts with real estate and the economic rules and functions of that versus putting it into a deeper market or a layering inside of or alongside the Bitcoin economy. How is that possible, and is that a function? What is the differences? Because the smart contracts, I do agree, is there's a lot of how do you say, like it gets like I get super confused, and
It's
it creates
noisy, a lot of noise. Yeah.
And so, however, I do believe that there's a way that building on these layers with real estate or really bringing those economic incentives, there's a way, and I don't know how. I'm curious to know if there's something that you guys have discovered. But first, that uniqueness of tokenization, central factors, the economics of that smart contract philosophy, what you guys see there in terms of real estate or things like this, and then is it possible to do a way more sound approach in the layers or the markets that you had just beautifully described earlier. So what do you gentlemen think? I'd love to just get, because I know that there's a lot of real estate guys that will be listening back to this, so it'd be very yeah, it'd be a great approach. Thoughts?
I mean, maybe just to tackle that specific example, like, so there's a notion, anybody who's, I think, been a homeowner or tried to purchase a home has dealt with, title companies and like sort of archaic ways that our society right now tries to track who owns what in the world in a meaningful way. There's, I think, a naive kind of like reaction of like blockchain fixes that. Awesome, because somehow blockchain has to do with like identity and cryptography and transparency and immutability, and somehow those are related to the things that you're interested in a titling process. Those would be good qualities for a titling system to have. And so there's this very natural notion that somehow they have to go together, and therefore I should use the blockchain today, right now, as it stands, no layers. I should just build some kind of, let's say, titling, tracking, property management system inside of this blockchain. That's like a thing that has happened and continues to happen. And we'll talk about this use case, but you can imagine people doing this for other use cases as well, right? Maybe tracking material possessions or other things instead of property or real estate, tracking carbon credits or many other things that people might try to approach similarly in altcoin land. So I would immediately start asking questions about this. It's like, okay, so when I lose my house key, all right, I don't lose my house. That's obviously right. I can just get my lock changed. I can break a window. Like it's still my house. Like the legal status is totally independent, and the titling status is independent from my house keys, obviously. On a blockchain, because of cryptography and private keys and so on, right? Like someone controls the titling process, or maybe it's a decentralized market-driven titling process that's happening on a blockchain. What happens when someone loses those private keys? Because that will happen. We can talk more about Unchained in our business, but part of what I think has made us successful is the acknowledgement that we can talk about like people as perfect, rational cryptography users in much the same way that economists sometimes talk about people as perfectly rational consumers, but that's a fiction. Right? People make mistakes. They lose keys, things they screw up. So having redundancy is important. And part of what our product Unchained provides is a capability to collaborate and create that redundancy. We can return to that topic. But the point is, like, people lose keys. It will happen. It must happen. And any system that doesn't plan for it is making a mistake. So what happens when someone loses the private key to your title for your house on the blockchain? Do you lose your house? Like, what does that even mean? So I think there's some very simple questions like that need to be well thought about. So a response to that might be, well, it won't be your private key that owns the house. It'll be your identity that owns the house. But now you just kick the can down the road. Well, what if I lose the keys that define my identity in this decentralized identity system that you're trying to build? That's another very popular category of altcoin thing, right? Is a decentralized ID kind of project. What happens when you lose that thing? Like, okay, well, what happens when millions and potentially billions of people are starting to use this system? How will it scale? All this data is in a blockchain. What happens when we discover that the way we've been encrypting the data maybe has a mistake in it, and all of that data is now completely public and legible? Maybe that's okay for a titling system, but if this is like a private document storage system or kind of generic computing system, that's probably not a good behavior. I'm trying to make the argument there that forward, what cryptographers would call forward secrecy, the notion that something that you've encrypted and protected today will indefinitely be encrypted, that we will never break today's level of encryption. Forward secrecy is a naive assumption. And I think what Bitcoin does correctly is it puts as little data into the blockchain as possible, because the blockchain is a toxic, slow, expensive data storage mechanism that only exists to serve the purposes that Bitcoin needs it for, which is to operate its decentralized market to create the world's first digital money. So putting more stuff in the blockchain is a very bad idea, because it leads to all these problems. Who has the keys? What happens when you lose the keys? What happens when you lose the keys to the system that you use to maintain the system with keys? These are some deep questions. Now, conversely, if you want to approach that in a Bitcoiner kind of way, I would say, well, start solving those problems independently. First, start working on a way to go from a slow store of value, settlement-oriented system. First, figure out how to do payments and make payments more quick and fast. That's kind of what Lightning is working on. If you do that, you'll realize that a big part of payments is actually routing and learning how people are connected digitally so that payment information can be routed. The Lightning Network is actually inside of it an onion routed network. So if you've heard of things like Tor or other kinds of private internet kind of technologies, the Lightning Network actually uses that technology internally. So it's very much like a mini internal internet inside of there. So you start to realize, okay, if you focus on payments, you actually wind up building telecommunications technology, just as an aside, because you need to be able to connect everybody to make those private confidential payments. Okay, so now you have your own little mini internet. Can you start incentivizing people to store data and transmit and sell data on this internet? Probably. I mean, the bad version of that, quote unquote, is called piracy. The good version of that is called Amazon Web Services, right? And there's a spectrum of use cases that will, I think, materialize when there's this more monetized direct pay internet that starts to appear in about 10 years, operating and denominated through Bitcoin, running on things like the Lightning Network. So now you have a way to store data really reliably, anonymously, powerfully on the internet. You're starting to do what? You're starting to develop the kinds of capabilities that people that think about dApps and Web3. These are the things that they're embedding right now at layer 1 in their blockchain. But none of what I'm talking about is happening on a blockchain. These are all happening in higher layer markets that are much more robust, efficient, easier to iterate on, and are going to scale and grow a lot faster. Like there is no blockchain today that is capable of scaling to the point that it could solve these problems, even in the narrowest use case that you asked about around, let's say, titling or real estate. That's too big of, like, it just won't work. And Bitcoin isn't claiming that it's going to do that in its blockchain. It's not. I'm not making that claim either. But I think altcoin folks believe that through technology, they can optimize somehow and get more and more data into the blockchain and do more and more things directly in the blockchain. But it's because they're obsessed with this notion of the blockchain, right? They believe that that's where the value comes from, and I don't believe that. I think the blockchain is to be avoided as much as possible, and that's the future of Bitcoin. Is now that we have the blockchain, and it made Bitcoin possible. How can we use Bitcoin and not the blockchain as much as possible to incentivize each other? It may not be clear exactly what I mean by that. Like, how can you use Bitcoin without using the blockchain? But it's important to know that. Go ahead.
I actually wanted to emphasize the difference between blockchain and time chain that we talk about within the Bitcoin network. Just so that it is clear for anybody that's paying attention that we really use the language of time chain versus the blockchain. Is that okay, Dhruv? Do you want to just expand on that a moment?
I mean, I love time chain. I'm a time chain guy, and I think that's one of those cool things. I was talking earlier about how if you try to build a payments network, you may wind up building a telecommunications network because you wind up having to route everybody properly to send the private payments back and forth. And that's an interesting connection of two problems. Same way, you want to build a monetary system on the internet in a decentralized way, you wind up with a what happened first problem. You need to know what happened first. If you're going to build a consistent ledger that has the history of people's balances and transactions, what happened first is really hard to figure out in a decentralized system. What if two nodes in the system disagree? How do you resolve that conflict? You don't have a centralized entity that can say, nope, you're right. You have the latest information. Let's ignore this side. This is the one that's correct. That's not possible. So how do you solve that problem? Well, turns out you need a really good clock. And so making the blockchain, or really the time chain, thinking of the time chain as a way to order events in time in a way that is in consensus, and thinking of it as that's really the problem that it's solving, I think is powerful and correct.
Yeah, non-manipulable time record keeping.
Which then of course people hear that and they're like, let's put house titles in there. And I'm just making the claim that okay, the problem that you're trying to solve might be valuable, but that implementation is naive.
Right. And actually I've heard the perspective of using the blockchain with what this notion of called infinite banking and bringing that into the mix of whole life insurance and all these type of smart contracts. And I got I was listening and I was just super confused, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I need to get more curious. I need to ask more questions. I need to go do more research. And it just made hold on a second, there's got to be a way more simple way. And I believe that there's this simplicity that is created through the time chain and the Bitcoin network. We can create way more sound structure by really, like you said, cultivating the routing, focusing on payments, making sure that we're really emphasizing the infrastructure, building it from that level of development. So I really love the fact that you're explaining the differences, because I don't believe that a lot of people really know that there's a huge difference between the blockchain tech and the altcoins and cryptocurrency, and what Bitcoin and the network and time chain, what we're doing. Like I really think there's a huge disconnect.
No,
In
there totally is, and it's a natural disconnect in my view. We also went through a phase early on in 2016, 17, 18, where Ethereum was rising and we were learning about it, and it was like, wow, it seemed very powerful, and our clients were asking us about it, and we went and we built Ethereum support into our product, and we took it out again. And the reason we took it out again is because we learned more. Like, one, we learned that, okay, yeah, clients might have been asking about it, but actually it wasn't their priority. That the clients who are our most core clients really cared a lot more about Bitcoin. So that was a good learning. Further, it was very painful to support and maintain. I view Bitcoin as a very robust, like, industrial level technology, as a software engineering kind of infrastructure person. And I kind of saw the Ethereum implementations as much more like consumer software. And that's a big distinction for me as a person running a financial technology backbone company. I prefer to run industrial software. I don't like I didn't like how brittle the Ethereum tools and technology felt, and that brittleness came from a desire to do all things for all people, right? Let's write as much, put as many features as possible into our smart contract so it does the most stuff. That's the unfortunate. I think it's an unfortunate malady that affects a lot of software designers. They want to make really featureful software, right? Software, in some sense, begs us to develop it. Like with code, you can write anything, and so you choose to write everything. And I think that's very dangerous in a blockchain context, right? Because all this code is costing you money to run, and code always creates surface area for attacks. And the more surface area for attacks you have, the more likely an attacker will find a hole and succeed. And this is why the history of smart contracts is a history of breaches. Maybe one day when technologists have developed more tooling, we'll be able to use smart contracts more effectively. But I just think that the whole thing is a little bit of a mistake. We're not programming the computers, we're programming the people. I think an interesting way to look at the distinction is to think about Unchained's product, just to turn to us for just a minute. Like, there are these totally quote unquote decentralized peer-to-peer smart contract altcoin driven lending products out there. So you can collateralize some amount of Bitcoin potentially, or wrapped Bitcoin more likely, for USDC or some kind of like stable coin construct that also is implemented via a smart contract in one of these platforms. And this is awesome. You can just boom, ping, done. You get the coins. Like, what a modern, amazing experience. Until you have a problem, right? Who are you going to call when you have that problem, right? Like, are you going to feel good that like there's an issue happening and no, there is no customer service? I mean, do you like that about your bank when you can't call your bank and speak to them about an issue that you're having? Is that really what you wanted from the future of financial technology? Contrast that with Unchained's experience. Like, when you borrow at Unchained and you collateralize your Bitcoin for a dollar-based loan, you speak with us. Like, we have real employees. You can call us. We will pick up the phone and talk with you. We have amazing customer service. There's no smart contract. There's a multi-signature collaborative custody. Some big words, but it really just means we're going to build a wallet together. Your Bitcoin collateral is going to go into that wallet together. We're both going to be able to look and see it, and it's going to be under some kind of shared control. It's very simple. There's no automatic smart contract margin calling or clawbacks or anything complicated. Those kind of complexities have led to hacks in the past, so we don't do that. And then you get real dollars in your real bank account. And we're a regulated financial entity. We follow all U.S. regulations and compliance requirements, and we're real people, and you can talk to us. I think our clients find this to be a massively superior way of doing the same quote unquote financial transaction, right? It's a real company based in the United States with people you can talk to that have good customer service. Your coins are better protected because they're in a multi-signature collaborative construct, but there's no like weird smart contract stuff going on. You're never going to be in a position where something is happening that you don't understand and there's no person to help you resolve that situation, because you're not dealing with a smart contract, you're dealing with a company. And they're,
Yeah.
I think, despite the decentralized world, I think companies are really important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be building one. I think there's still a role for companies to play, and this is one of them.
Something said that Abigail Johnson, the Fidelity CEO, had said in some interview, I think even back in like 2018, so it's just we were kind of earlier in our journeys, but still, kind of discovering and creating what Unchained is to be. But her response in an interview kind of about like the robo-advisor trend and the trend of these kind of online, portfolio management tools that places like Fidelity and Schwab have rolled out in the last 5 years, that she was like, no, I mean, for them as a corporate principle and strategy, they saw how their customers valued people at the end of the line. And then when it comes to making financial decisions and dealing with large value transactions, that you want like just a person on the other side of that transaction, or it just adds a little je ne sais quoi, or just like another extra quality. And I have ideas about where that comes from. And it was also further reinforced. There were some early Bitcoin conferences we went to that I met the founder of a Bitcoin exchange in Zimbabwe. There's Zimbabwe's only Bitcoin exchange, one or two or something like that. And I remember early on as we've gone through our journey of security and just remarking about, oh, hey, I bet you keep your corporate offices hidden, or you don't let people know where you are. It's like, oh no, quite the opposite. I mean, for him, a lot of the exchange clients want to come into a physical space and use the computer in the lobby or in the thing, and like have that kind of transactability. And so even just from whatever end of the financial services spectrum of products and clients you are, there's something to that human touch. It's not always going to be there, but it's and for me, my ideas about it, I think, are just ways that, I mean, money can represent a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Financial transactions cover the gamut of human intent, desire, and emotions, ranging from gift giving towards philosophies. Money solves spite. Money is used as rewards and carrots and sticks and things in all these kind of different contexts. And so those are all a reflection of the human experience and our connection with each other and our connection with these ideas and values. And so that it's just a very human kind of problem. And so like we don't just then, I mean, maybe in the future it'll look like we make money to then spend it on robots, but we would make money to spend it on each other and ourselves and like things like that. So I think then just having the kind of people as part of it all is really important too.
So important. The best part is the people. And this is where I'm so excited to actually turn into, is like this bespoke, well-functioning market focus of how you guys collaborate and reduce redundancy, so that like the how of Unchained, the consistency of what you guys are bringing to the table with this type of principle focused, principle based business that is focused on the human approach. It really it's something that I know for me is very important in this technological world. Being able to feel and pay attention to somebody's genuine nature, and knowing that I'm a person versus just a dollar figure. It to me, it's really meaningful, because ultimately, that's what we're here for. There's a deeper meaning to our experience of life. And so I'd love to go a little bit deeper, as you guys mentioned about Unchained, and how businesses can come in and really collaborate with you guys to really integrate their, whether it's transitioning from the old infrastructure or the old paradigm of business to a new paradigm and a new economy. I like to call it the divine economy, because the proof of work concept is to give more than we ever expect to receive, has been created or talked about by Napoleon Hill in the Laws of Success, where he talks about to give more than you ever expect to receive. Tony talks about it, one of my main teachers, and it's also fundamentally the proof of work concept, value for value, that is created inside of Bitcoin. So I'd love to go a little bit deeper into that, fellas, if you don't mind, because that transition, I believe, is in our lifetime, and I believe that we have a responsibility of guiding this transition in a very principle-based way, and I'd love to know how you guys can support those like businesses or leaders that want to really do good business or really good business, so that we can continue to navigate in a really more sound fiduciary way.
Yeah, I think I mean, even just in the how or the practicum of Unchained, it ties back to people, or people just keep coming after me between that and who Drew and I have chosen to put around us, who we've had privilege of having around us in terms of really good people, principled folks that work hard and you know, come on with a kind of mission driven purpose. One of the values we sort of both discovered and created here was Bitcoin is our common purpose, and that you know, it's just really meant. I do think most often the most valuable companies that achieve commercial success have some mission driven component, and Bitcoin, thankfully, as just through its own journey over the last 10 to 15 years, has just a really large community, a big tent of a lot of different people that care about its success, and then then they connect right next to each other. Bitcoin success and Unchained success is, you know, kind of codependent. And so their way of kind of, you know, architecting and building the cathedral of Bitcoin as a project to lead to future generations is to kind of do that work here at Unchained. So I'm immensely grateful that so much of that is just like part of the consciousness here. The clients feel it, colleagues feel it from each other, and that builds a lot of that alignment. It kind of comes out of the gate, almost come for free. I mean, working in Bitcoin is there's periods of starvation, periods of, you know, frustration when you can't get to it all, like all these kind of things. There's a full life cycle here of human experience, but at least the people feel united. I'd say too, one learning, you know, is we have had that principle and that value of Bitcoin being our common purpose for a long time. But only in recent years we actually kind of had to update it. You know, there's some ways we've been through layoffs as a company. We've gone through, you know, the 2022 bear market was tough on a lot of folks, and we were prepared enough for it, and we got through it. But like also Drew and I were dissatisfied with some of the commercial success. So some ways we kind of developed, I think the corollary to Bitcoin as our common purpose is that it's not our only purpose. We are also a business. We are a commercial business, and that became reflected in certain decisions to now start charging in different areas. You know, we can't, you know, just survive forever on raising venture capital and putting that to the good work of helping people with self custody and all the great things we do. So yeah, I think there's ways it's oscillation makes it feel like it goes. It's just that it's the natural pendulum of some of these things, of kind of finding what it is to be purely, you know, mission driven, finding what it is to be commercially driven, while not leaving that mission behind. And that's kind of been the arc. And so somewhere like between, you know, we're kind of, I think, refining the middle of that from having swung both ways over the last 8 years, I'd say.
I love it. Do you find that now with transitioning business leaders into the Bitcoin experience, is it more adopted or can be more adopted inside of organizational with these multi-sig wallets? So, for example, we're working on some projects with regards to the energy sector, and really cultivating the energy sector to capturing and using the power to create a lot of energy for Bitcoin mining. So we're in the process of integrating that and bringing that to some major power plants. And so now, how would that work into bringing that multi-sig collaborative technology to a business? For example, you know, the data solutions that we're providing, but also maybe a traditional energy company that works, you know, strictly inside of another way. How could we kind of merge those together, or is it even possible? I don't know. I'm just getting curious here, being completely vulnerable and you know, putting some real cases on the wall here for you.
Oh, such a good question. I think, and it's a great tee up for Dhruv on, I think, a lot of the energy angles and the convergence of those markets and industries. I think just something else I'll say, because I think, you know, bridging both your questions was this aspect of like the the adoption of either Bitcoin or what it's like to work with other businesses around this stuff. And I think that's something we can speak to from the range of our journey, having covered a lot of events that affected all of us between the pandemic or the kind of bankruptcies in the industry and banking failures early last year in 2023 of issues that showed up there. Even Canadian trucker protests, all these things kind of had instances for a lot of people of kind of something like a wake-up call or a directly experienced issue or challenge with our how our kind of current financial system works and how much control banks have over what is supposed to be your money, and those kinds of questions and things that come up. And so we've seen a lot through our journey at Unchained, a correlation of things like that, events like that, and more clients, new inbound rushes of people that finally understand Bitcoin, or maybe had Bitcoin, but then finally understand now the value of self-custody, or like non-intermediated ability to transact with your Bitcoin and send it to where you'd like, kind of have it affecting that true control over your own wealth and your own property. So that's just been there. It's just kind of one of the ways. It's almost like an anti-fragile type frame or use case of just each of those bigger shocks and lessons that we all were a part of. It brings more people into the kind of model Unchained has, and how we hew pretty very well true to the things that make Bitcoin valuable and useful. So I think Bitcoin's value and utility to the energy industry is itself really great and big topic that Dhruv, you've done a lot of great thinking in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, and I feel like that might take us in a whole nother speculative direction, which I'm not sure that we're ready for. Maybe, Eric, we are, and you can
100% we're ready.
You can lead me in there. I thought I would try to answer, I think what I thought I heard you asking a little bit more directly around, like, how do businesses and multi-sig and collaborative custody, and like how does all that kind of connect and work, and what's the point? And I thought maybe that would be just a good thing to just review.
Yes.
Yeah. So really, I feel like, and I'll say two comments about it. Maybe I'll describe what it is, and then I'll talk about like where I think businesses are in relation to using it. And so returning to the beginning of that whole story, like, so we've talked, I think I mentioned a few times, blockchains, cryptography. Bitcoin is ultimately protected by cryptographic private keys. That's always the ultimate form of Bitcoin ownership and control. That if you're, like, to say, a Coinbase user, for example, you may never have experienced this aspect of Bitcoin, because for you, Bitcoin is it's like a stock or something you just buy on a website and just hold it. You're not seeing the cryptographic private key part, because Coinbase is doing that for you. And that's a really great way to start with Bitcoin, often for many people. That's how I started with Bitcoin. I don't mind saying I bought my Bitcoin way back in the day in 2013 on Coinbase, like, absolutely. So I'm not at all a Coinbase hater by any means. This is a very important and valid way to get into Bitcoin. This custodial model that Coinbase uses. But after a while, you may start to feel, if you're a Bitcoin owner, that you're missing the point a little bit, that maybe you have an experience where Coinbase locks your account for some reason, and then you can't get access to your Bitcoin. It takes weeks for you to get back in because Coinbase has really slow and notoriously bad support. Okay, maybe you have this experience. You're like, wait a minute, this is basically the same thing as dollars. Like, yeah, it's going up a bit, but like, I thought the point of this was like, it's money that I can control. It's not going to be able to be taken from me. Like, there's something about those design goals when Bitcoin was created. So you're not experiencing that level of Bitcoin ownership, and you don't have those capabilities when you're a Coinbase user. So a lot of people will then elect to move to a single sig wallet, which is really just a way of saying, okay, I will control the private key to my Bitcoin. I'm not going to let somebody else do it. I'll do it myself. That's, in fact, when Bitcoin first started in 2008 and 9, there was no Coinbase. There was nobody to do it for you. If in that era, the only way to hold Bitcoin was to get a private key and use it to hold Bitcoin yourself and protect that private key. And of course, now you gain a lot of capabilities in this model. You are in control of your Bitcoin. No one can stop you from transacting with it. You're never going to have an account that's going to have to be locked, etc. You're just a peer on the blockchain with everybody else. It's wonderful. But now, again, what if you lose your key? Because that happens. That absolutely does happen. So at some point, you start to get more and more paranoid about it. If you're in this position, there's $10,000 sitting in a drawer on this device that supposedly I'm okay with. Now it's $100,000. What if it becomes $1 million? Now you have a device that may be worth more than your home sitting in your home. Like, and I think fortunately or unfortunately, that is the experience of a lot of people who've been Bitcoin for a number of years. Bitcoin grows so dramatically over long periods of time that if you start with a $10,000 investment and you wait 10 years, it's millions of dollars. And there's a lot of people now who have been in Bitcoin for 5, 10 years and have experienced that level of growth and have, depending on where they started and how much they sold along the journey, they've become a large part of their wealth is now in Bitcoin. And so the notion of protecting it really well is important to them. And moreover, they've been in Bitcoin for so long that they've seen so many custodial failures that their willingness to trust things like Coinbase is low. And so when Unchained comes along and says, okay, we have a solution to all of this, we're not going to make you choose between letting somebody do it for you and doing it 100% yourself. Let's blend these options. Bitcoin isn't just about one private key. You can write a Bitcoin wallet that uses multiple private keys. If you've seen like the nuclear silos with the multiple keys at once, similar idea. So Unchained uses and this is all just built into Bitcoin. You don't have to this is not some custom smart contract or anything like that. It's just built in and it's been used, for a long time. In fact, even Coinbase and other custodians probably in some ways use these kind of multi-sig controls internal to their organizations. You're not seeing it, but things like this are happening quite commonly behind the scenes at custodians. Unchained takes multi-sig, which is this multiple keys idea, and we make it collaborative. So for example, we will define a 2 out of 3 multi-sig wallet. That's our most typical structure on Unchained. And what that means is there are 3 private keys that control the Bitcoin, and 2 of them are required in order to move the Bitcoin, any 2 out of the 3. And typically that is a very common multi-sig model generally, but in Unchained, we'll make that collaborative. So perhaps you as the client, you might hold 2 out of those 3 private keys, and Unchained will hold 3rd private key. This is a really good solution because now Unchained cannot stop you from doing anything. You have 2 out of the 3 keys. It's much like being in a self-custody single sig situation where you're just in direct control. You can move the Bitcoin anytime you want. In fact, even if Unchained's website were to go down, our company were to dissolve and go away, nothing's going to happen to your Bitcoin. You can still use your own keys to move it around. You're very much in control. But if you lose a key, right, then we can step in, right? Come to the website, you say, hey, I've been using your service. I lost this key. I need you to help me recover. Like, here's a new key that I've uploaded. Let's sweep the funds onto this new wallet that we'll build. We have done that for hundreds of clients. We have saved thousands of Bitcoin because of this capability that we offer through our platform. First of all, that feels awesome. I'm really proud of that. But 2, it's a very sticky solution because once you experience this, you're like, yeah, this is the best of all possible worlds. If I care about self-custody and I care about support and I care about redundancy, you could always do this kind of multi-sig thing yourself. In fact, Unchained publishes open source software that helps you do this yourself. You just want to do it without us. But a lot of people, myself included, I was one of the first clients of Unchained, really value having Unchained helping them in their wallets. So this is the core product. It's seen a lot of adoption amongst individuals, especially those who have been in Bitcoin for a number of years and have learned to value custody and have learned to, and maybe experience self-custody using a single sig solution where they're the only single point of failure. And they felt really nervous about that. And so this is a wonderful solution for them. Unfortunately, I would say with businesses, especially the larger the business is, the harder this model is for them to understand. I think Bitcoin has been really unique in that it's been a revolution that has started not from, inside the government or inside big banks or inside of academia or inside any really consolidated traditional centralized power structures. It started at the fringes, right? It's been individuals randomly all over the world who have found Bitcoin first and have come to understand it first and actually are ahead in the adoption curve, both in terms of understanding, ownership, sophistication, like usage, belief, right? Like Bitcoiners as individuals are far ahead of governments, companies, nation states, whatever you want. So I think that's actually really good. That's powerful. I'd much rather that than the opposite scenario. But what it does mean is that for a business that's starting to think about getting into Bitcoin, what Unchained offers can be a little inaccessible today. That it's probably more of a fit for that business to go with Fidelity or Coinbase because that looks just like getting a bank account. That looks just like any other thing that business might be used to doing in other ways. Businesses aren't yet really conversant with the idea of how can I hold a private key to protect my funds? That's not a thing most businesses do. It's not a thing most individuals were doing either, like more than 10 years ago. But individuals are easier to are faster at learning things and adopting new technologies. Businesses take more time. And so again, it's a manifestation that in our choice of custodial technologies, individuals are ahead of the curve, in my view, with respect to businesses. I think
And
Unchained definitely go ahead, Joe.
yeah, only to bring it together between that. Yes, that's totally true. And businesses totally have had the mostly cause and good reason to just trust the bank, trust that external participant until it didn't work. So last year, SVB gave thousands of companies a sleepless weekend there of just like not knowing if they'd have their cash, for payroll the next week. So that did drive, I know, for businesses like Unchained, a lot of others, that the idea of, well, if I kept Bitcoin on the balance sheet, cool. But even if I did have it on the balance sheet, I need to have it in a way that I'm not prevented from needing it or using it in the short term because of a bank failure or some centralized custodial failure. So our lessons, and it worked out. Or yes, people got their money out of SVB continuously there. So but at least that fearful moment put people more in the perspective of understanding value of this. But I still say, a true adoption is lower or not as strong as the individuals, for Drew's point.
Oh, you're right. It's definitely starting to change. I think awareness is growing. I mean, I think we've reached the era where a lot of businesses are willing to say, yeah, Bitcoin is here to stay. Maybe we should hold some Bitcoin. Like that is already now within the Overton window of discourse in a lot of the companies. And so, give it a few more years, I think you'll start to see those same businesses be like, hey, the way we're holding our Bitcoin could be improved. Like there are other solutions out there that have better properties, and maybe their compliance departments will sort of start to realize, like, actually, this is something we should be thinking about, and we should be creating guardrails around. Like that sophistication will come. I'm confident by the time that it happens, those businesses will choose Unchained. We are seeing success at Unchained with smaller businesses, those who are more nimble, who are capable of sort of learning about Bitcoin faster and kind of learning the value of keys a little bit more quickly. So small operating businesses, family offices, like funds, like these are definitely clients at Unchained already. I just don't think we're quite in the era yet where giant public companies and nation states and so on are ready to engage in this kind of collaborative model. But I do think it is the future, and they will. And I think that's going to be really compelling because I think a world where human beings and organizations and governments and companies are all connected with cryptographic connectivity between them. So there's a strong sense of being able to prove identity and intent through public and private key cryptography. I think that's actually a really interesting and powerful world. We probably don't have a huge amount of time to get into it, but I think about the interconnection with AI there, right? That I think some people think the killer app for AI is like creating art or displacing content creators or something. Maybe that's true, but I actually think the killer app for AI is tricking human beings. And so the more that human beings build systems that make ours hard to trick through AI, because our senses, our emotions are clearly quite gullible, right? Like it's easy to convince your grandma that AI simulated voice asking her to send you $120 or whatever is that's really you, right? Like that's such a common scam right now. It's unbelievable. But human beings are susceptible to that kind of attack, right? Like if grandma just understood that just press this button, or like if the phone understood that there was a cryptographic, like cryptography is very powerful at helping in these situations, but it's not well dispersed enough today. I think Bitcoin can be a reason why cryptographic tools like hardware wallets and other things become more commonplace amongst individuals. Like they buy them maybe initially because they help them with their Bitcoin, but eventually they become major components of how we assert our digital identity, like on the internet, through cryptography, through offline keys, which can't be therefore as easily compromised by scary people with rogue AIs.
Dhruv, I want to know what your thoughts are on the energy companies connecting to bringing and securing our monetary system and our financial responsibility. Do you feel like and I'll tell you my perspective, and then I'd love to just get yours. I really believe that energy organizations, these companies are the future of banking. Like what they can do is they can secure an abundant monetary protocol for all of us versus holding on to a traditional banking system, because they're capable of holding all of that energy and infinitely bringing it to the power grid and securing that through the mining. And so I'd love to get your insight, your perspective on that, your thought processes on that. I know we have a little bit of time left. I don't, but I do think that this is an important part, just because of the area of drive that I'm also going into, and the people that are probably going to be listening to this, because I'm going to be sending it to them after. So it'd be important for us to just touch on this, so that they are aware of how integral they are to helping us build an abundant system for a lot of people around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely try to speak on that. I think there are many that have written and spoken more eloquently than I'll be able to, but I will try my best here. So I think, and maybe we can come back to this and you can clarify for me. I definitely think there's a strong relationship between energy production, like the global power apparatus, and energy distribution networks in the world, and Bitcoin mining. I think that's a very, very strong connection. But I don't necessarily see like banking as directly connected to that. It's obviously downstream and adjacent, but like these two are much more directly connected in my view. And the reason for that is because I view the Bitcoin mining industry as a very unique energy producer, energy consumer, and one that has never really existed before in human history. It's very, very unique, and as a result, it can have an effect on our energy generation and distribution systems. I think a lot of times, this is the physicist in me's language, I think a lot of times people approach these complex issues with very first order thinking, and they don't understand or consider like how feedback and systems that change each other over time, that nothing is really static. So for example, the fact that Bitcoin uses lots of energy in its proof of work markets, what I would call markets, this is really scary for a lot of people. For a lot of people, it's Bitcoin would be perfect if it didn't do this, right? Or for a lot of people, the fact that Bitcoin does this is a reason to dismiss Bitcoin or to actively campaign against Bitcoin, right? If you're an environmentalist or if you believe in climate change. I am an environmentalist and I do believe in climate change. I don't necessarily accept or believe a lot of the solutions that people put out there. I find them unworkable and sort of anti-democratic, but I do believe the problem is real. But returning to Bitcoin, if you care about those issues, as I do, you can sort of be in this mode where you're like, well, maybe we should remove this from Bitcoin and make it better. I was certainly in that position in like 2017, maybe. I thought Bitcoin could be improved by removing this requirement for using lots of energy. But that's until I started to read more and learn about the fact that Bitcoin is a unique energy consumer. And in particular, what I mean by that is Bitcoin is unique in that it can use energy anywhere in the world. That energy does not have to be co-located near material supplies of raw materials or markets or industrial facilities. Like the energy isn't being used in that way. The energy is just being used for compute. So if you can ship computers out to some location with energy and you can run compute through those computers, you're going to make money. And the lower your cost of electricity, the more money that you will make. And so Bitcoin drives this like two simultaneous changes in the energy infrastructure of the world, right? It causes industrialization to get located where energy is cheapest, not necessarily where materials exist, like mines or other resources that we're harvesting, or where people live, but just where energy is. And there's lots of places where there's abundant energy, but there isn't industrialization or raw resources that have caused that energy to get harvested. So Bitcoin brings human beings to places where energy is not otherwise being used. So that's very powerful. And then the second effect is that Bitcoin miners deeply, deeply care about that cost of energy. And so they're super incentivized to use low-cost, sustainable sources of energy. In fact, the demand pressure that they can put on those sectors of the energy industry is huge. And more demand pressure creates like ultimately a cheaper, larger market that's more efficient with more solar panels, more wind generation, more geothermal. Like these are all the things that people who believe and are worried about climate change want to create, sometimes through forceful legislation or other kinds of like anti-democratic measures. This is just, again, an economic incentive. This is an industry saying, I want as much sustainable energy generation technology as you can create. I will pay as much as possible. Or like, and I will use it forever. Like this is the change you want to create in the world. You want industries like this. And as a result, there's the second order effect, right? Yes, Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, but over time, what can Bitcoin do to the energy infrastructure of the world at not first order, but second and third and fourth and to all orders? That feedback means that the energy apparatus itself changes, right? If you can't simultaneously make the claim that Bitcoin is bad because it uses a lot of the world's energy, and yet Bitcoin will never change anything about the world's energy infrastructure. Those are incompatible views. If Bitcoin is using a lot of energy, it's going to have feedback on the infrastructure. And what is that feedback going to look like? It's going to look like more green, sustainable energy production. And not because Bitcoin miners are particularly environmentally oriented. I don't think they are. I think they may be anti-aligned. They don't care. They just want the cheapest energy. And so this is wonderful. Like this is what gets us to nuclear fusion and things that really change the game for human energy flourishing. Now, I think coming back to like the largest scales, like this is what I see as really deeply important. If we can, it's sort of hard to get out of a local minimum sometimes, right? And it feels like right now we have relatively cheap energy in the form of fossil fuels that is fairly damaging to the earth around us. And so given that situation, you can try to force us out of that minimum and force us into a green technology kind of paradigm, or you can hope to lead us out of that through economic incentives. And I think that's the more dependable pathway. And I want to live in a world where it doesn't make sense to burn like fossil fuels because it's cheaper to use solar power or nuclear power. That's the solution. And so how do we get to that? Well, we need massive demand on those technologies. Like there's an old line about like you will never have nuclear fusion when gasoline is cheaper than Coca-Cola. And like that's still basically true today. I think it's slightly more expensive today at this point. But like gas is so cheap. And in that situation, no one is going to fund nuclear power plants. Moreover, if they did fund a nuclear power plant, how much money can they make from that nuclear power plant? Well, they can only make as much money as there's energy that people are willing to buy from that nuclear power plant. So if you overproduce energy from an over-provisioned nuclear power plant, thermodynamically, you can't get rid of that energy. You're stuck with it. And no one wants to buy it from you because you overproduced based on market demand. So now you have to pay somebody to take it from you. So there's very little incentive to overproduce energy, right? We're usually producing just about as much energy as we need because it's very expensive to do more than that. Again, this is where Bitcoin's uniqueness as an energy consumer changes the game. If Bitcoin exists, you can always sell Bitcoin that energy. Bitcoin is so hungry for energy, it will always take it from you. And this means the economic risk of over-provisioning energy production is much less. Like you can comfortably over-provision how much energy you might need at a local power production facility, at green or otherwise. And you're going to get paid back for that because you will have this consumer, as long as you have Bitcoin ASICs or you have a local mining industry that can take up that power, they will always take that power from you. And this is really powerful because then it means overall the world's energy usage is increasing. If the world's energy usage increasing, our capabilities can increase in concert. Like we talk about water scarcity, right? And like climate change causing the destruction of like the very tiny amount of fresh water we have on this planet. Like this is a real problem. It absolutely is. But the best solution to this problem is so much massive energy overabundance that you can just boil seawater and you don't have to worry about it. Like that is hard to do today because we are living at that fine knife's edge of just enough energy to meet market demand at all times. If we had 10x that amount of energy just available and much of it was going into Bitcoin mining all the time, it would be very cheap and easy for people to do crazy mega scale engineering projects like massive desalination facilities that create huge amounts of fresh water in the world. Like there's
so much energy.
Sorry. Just these are those second, third, fourth order effects that like Bitcoin feeds back and changes the world in a meaningful way. And so these views totally changed my attitude on this stuff, and it's why I now believe that energy production and Bitcoin mining are the same industry. They just haven't quite realized it yet. So that's what I think happens over the next 10 to 20 years is those industries just become the same.
And I just want to I apologize for interrupting, but I wanted to really just emphasize the importance of how much over and abundant energy is being put into our atmosphere by burning these fossil fuels, and we can capture that now. We can capture that now and turn it into power and electricity and really implement a way more sustainable way, a regenerative way of capturing all this energy that's just being thrown out. Here in Alberta, It's everywhere. It's everywhere, bro. And so these are major plans that are really, you know, we're focused on spending a lot of time with to really capture, turn that power and mine Bitcoin, because we are incentivized, and also they're willing to use the heat from all of the heat that's generated. So this is capturing a lot of opportunity inside of these components. So bro, I really appreciate you, man. Like both of you have tremendous wisdom, and I'm very grateful for your insight, your intellect, your intelligence, your awareness. And I love the ability that the fact that we're aligned in such a deep and meaningful way. Thank you so much, brothers, both for taking the time, you know, genuinely educating me and everyone that is going to be listening live or otherwise. And fundamentally, you know, I'd love to get, if anybody wants to know more about Unchained, how to connect with you fellows personally, where is the best way that they can reach out, how they can connect, what works, what's the best way?
Awesome. I mean, unchained.com, simple way to check out the business. Each of our emails are our first names at unchained.com. So Joe at Unchained, Dhruv at Unchained. Find us, both the company and us on Twitter, through some of those breadcrumbs. And yeah, really appreciate your having us on, Eric. It's been a fun conversation.
Likewise, fellas. And last question for both of you before we go. If you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
I'd go to the water somewhere. So yeah, find water peaceful. I would spend at least 50% of that probably on or near the water.
Oh, dude, staycation, barbecuing with my parents and family. Totally.
Big love to you fellas. Honestly, I'm very grateful, and you know, let's keep changing the world in a meaningful way. Big love.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.